You ever notice how some folks think the rules don't apply to them? Not because they're smarter, not because they're better, just because they've spent so long being told they're important, they started to believe it. My name's Jamal Carter. I'm 29. Big guy, soft around the edges. Been that way most my life. I'm not loud. Never been the type to kick up dust just to prove a point. I work from home, cybersecurity mostly. The kind of job where you watch more than you talk, where you learn that patience pays off better than anger ever could. I bought this little place last year. Quiet street, good soil for planting. I've got lavender by the fence, mint by the porch, and marigolds out back. My mother always said, grow something beautiful. It keeps your spirit clean. I didn't come here looking for trouble, but trouble, well, sometimes it parks itself right outside your door. It started small, a white Range Rover, clean, shiny like a badge, the kind of car that makes a statement before the engine even shuts off. First time I saw it, I figured maybe the neighbor had company. Didn't think much of it. But then it came back. Again and again. Always parked too close to my driveway. Sometimes halfway across it. Not enough to block me in completely. Just enough to let me know that whoever was behind the wheel didn't care whose space they were taking. I'm not quick to fuss. Folks who are quick to fuss usually burn out fast. I gave it time. Gave them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they didn't notice. Maybe they didn't know. But here's the thing. The people who don't notice, they're usually the same ones who don't care to. I asked around. Turns out the car belonged to the woman 2 doors down, Caroline Beckett, a federal judge. I'd seen her once or twice before. Tall, blonde, always dressed sharp, heels, pearls, fitted blazers. She carried herself like the ground should be grateful she walked on it. I tried polite first, raised my hand to wave the next time she parked too close. She didn't wave back, didn't even look my way. It's a strange feeling, standing 5 feet from someone and being treated like you're invisible. But I've been invisible before, plenty of times. Older black folks know what I mean. Overlooked at the store, passed over at the interview, spoken to slow like you might not understand, or worse, not spoken to at all. I'm not new to that, so I let it go. 1 time, 2 times, 3. Then came the morning I found tire tracks running right through my front bed, crushed the lavender clean down to the roots. Lavender my mother taught me to plant. Lavender I'd raised from seed, watering every morning before the sun got too high. It wasn't just the plants, it was the message. This doesn't matter, you don't matter, that's how it felt. Still, I stayed quiet, at first, but I kept watching. I started noticing little things. How she'd toss her coffee cup into my trash bin on her way out, like my space was just an extension of hers. How she'd speed up past my house, barely slowing when kids were riding their bikes down the lane. I caught her once as I was out trimming the edge near my driveway. "Excuse me, ma'am," I said, nice and easy. "Would you mind pulling your car back just a bit next time? You're kind of sitting on my line here." She didn't even take off her sunglasses, just smiled that tight little smile, the kind that looks like it hurts to hold but feels good to deliver. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, tilting her head like I was a child who'd spoken out of turn. "I was only there for a minute. You weren't even home." I blinked, took a breath. I could feel my hand clench around the shears I was holding. "I'm home now," I told her, calm, still soft. "Just asking kindly." She waved one hand through the air like she was shooing a fly. "Maybe leave a note next time if it bothers you that much." Then she turned her back, walked off, heels tapping the sidewalk like applause for herself. I stood there for a while, staring at the space where her car had been. I've spent my life hearing folks say, "Don't make waves. Let it go. Pick your battles." I've picked my battles carefully, always have. But I also know when a battle's come looking for me. See, I work with computers, security systems, passwords, firewalls. I know how people get careless when they think no one's paying attention. Caroline Beckett, she wasn't the kind who worried about being watched. She was the kind who assumed no one could ever touch her. The night after she ran down my lavender, I sat at my desk and logged into one of the oldest tricks in the book. Social engineering. I didn't need to hack her. People like her, they hack themselves. Password resets, old email accounts tied to public records. A little cross-checking, a little patience. Within an hour, I was inside her Gmail. I didn't go looking for anything. Not at first. I just wanted to know who I was dealing with. What I found, well, let's just say there are things a federal judge shouldn't have in her inbox. Things that don't sit right with ethics boards or courtrooms. Things like payments from a corporate lobbyist under investigation. Things like personal messages to a defense attorney in a case she'd ruled on last spring. Things like receipts that didn't match the story she told the IRS. I sat back in my chair and let it sink in. She'd parked in the wrong driveway. I could have stopped right there, closed the laptop, let it be, pretended I hadn't seen what I saw. But there's a moment, if you've lived long enough, you know it, when silence feels less like peace and more like permission. And I wasn't about to give permission. Not this time. See, I didn't grow up with much. But my mother, she taught me two things that stuck. First, never let folks mistake your kindness for weakness. And second, if you're going to stand your ground, stand it clean. So I sat there staring at the screen, reading those emails twice, 3 times. Every line, every date, every attachment. There was no mistake. This woman, the one tossing her trash in my bin, the one rolling over my flowers like they were nothing. She had skeletons piled so high behind that polished smile, it was a wonder she could stand upright. Lobby money, undisclosed gifts, quiet meetings arranged at odd hours, far from courtrooms, far from eyes. But I didn't rush. Anger makes folks sloppy. I wasn't about to let her make me sloppy. No, I took my time, downloaded what I needed, organized it neat, labeled the files like a good accountant might. Ethics concern, Beckett.pdf, financial irregularities, Beckett.xlsx, conflict of interest, Beckett.docx. I didn't want everything, just enough. Enough to make the picture clear. Enough to remind her that power doesn't always sit behind a bench or drive a shiny SUV. Sometimes it sits in a quiet house, behind a desk, in the hands of a man who knows how to wait. A man who knows how to listen. The next morning, I went about my routine like nothing was different. Fed the mint and the lavender, checked on the marigolds. Caroline's Range Rover was back, as bold as ever, half across my line, nose tipped toward my porch like it belonged there. I didn't feel mad, not even a little. I felt steady. That afternoon, I drafted an email. No threats, no big words, just facts. Subject: regarding your parking, Caroline. This is a courtesy note. I've noticed your vehicle parked repeatedly across my property line. I've also taken notice of certain contents in your email account that may interest the Ethics Committee and the Federal Oversight Board. I'm not looking for trouble. I'm looking for respect. Please keep your vehicle clear of my driveway from now on. This will be our only conversation about the matter. Regards, Jamal Carter. Simple. Director. I sent it from a burner account, of course. I'm not reckless. 2 hours later, I heard the sound of tires squealing just a little too fast down the lane. Looked out my window and saw that big white SUV parked neat as a pin. One full house down the street, not a hair over the line. Funny how fast folks can learn when they realize you're watching. But she didn't stop there. Next morning, I caught her outside, pretending to fiddle with the mailbox like she had some business there. Sunglasses on, arms crossed tight across her chest. She didn't say a word. But that smile was gone. In its place, something colder, something that knew she'd been seen. She turned on her heel before I could nod hello. And that's when I knew. The message had landed. Thing is, I didn't feel victorious. This wasn't about winning. It was about standing up. About saying, no more. I didn't want her scared. I wanted her aware. Aware that my peace wasn't free for the taking. Aware that my quiet wasn't weakness. It was choice. And now she'd run out of choices. That evening, I sat out on my porch, cup of tea in hand, Rosie, my old bulldog, snoring soft at my feet. It was a little past 9 when the knock came. Slow, heavy, not the kind of knock that asked permission. Rosie let out a low growl from where she lay by the door. Smart dog. She could always feel when something was off. I stood up from the kitchen table, set down my tea, and walked to the front window first. Never hurts to know who's come calling before you open the door. There he was, tall, broad shoulders under a dark tailored coat, hands folded polite in front of him, but the way he held himself said he wasn't there for conversation. Vincent Beckett, Caroline's husband. The name didn't come up much in the neighborhood, but I'd heard enough whispers, enough stories about men who crossed him and found themselves out of business, or worse. I opened the door halfway, didn't invite him in. "Evening," I said, voice steady. "Mr. Carter," he replied, nodding once. His smile was thin, the kind that shows teeth but not warmth. "Mind if I have a word?" "I'm listening." He tilted his head, took one slow step closer. "Look," he said, soft like honey dripping from a spoon. "I get it. Man's got to stand up for himself. Nobody likes their space being disrespected. I respect that." He paused, let the words settle. "But sometimes pushing back too hard? Well, things get messy." I didn't blink. "What exactly are you saying, Mr. Beckett?" He chuckled, low in his throat. "I'm saying accidents happen. Gardens catch fire. Dogs go missing. Men slip on wet steps. Life's unpredictable that way." Rosie growled again, ears back, her body tense. I laid a hand on her head, gentle. "I'm guessing you didn't come all this way just to talk about safety hazards." Vincent's smile didn't move, but his eyes, dark as tar, held steady on mine. "My wife's been upset. You embarrassed her, made her feel cornered." He took another slow step, lowering his voice. "That's not something I let stand." I nodded calm, reached over and pushed the door open a little wider, just enough to make my stance clear. "You done, Vincent?" Silence. "Good," I said. "Now let me say my piece." I leaned one shoulder against the doorframe, took my time. "You think I'd make a move like this without a plan? Without a safety net?" I asked, eyes locked on his. "The files don't sit with me alone. They're backed up. 3 cloud drives, password protected, scheduled release." I let that hang there, watched the flicker behind his eyes. "If I don't log in every morning by 8, those files go out. To the ethics board, to the press, to a few folks I'm sure you'd rather not have looking your way." His smile faded, just a little. I stayed steady. "See, you came here thinking fear would work, that maybe a big man in a dark coat might make me back down." I shook my head slow. "But here's the thing, Vincent. Men like me, we've lived with fear our whole lives. Fear of being overlooked, of being dismissed, of being stepped on without anyone noticing." I straightened up, stepped forward, closing the space between us. "I know what it feels like to be invisible, and that makes me dangerous, because I've had time to learn how to stand my ground." Vincent's jaw tightened. His hands flexed once, then stilled. I leaned in just enough so he couldn't miss my words. "You put one finger on me, on my dog, on my garden, and you won't be able to pay off the noise that follows. Not this time." Silence. Heavy. The kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. Then he smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. "Well," he said, stepping back, smoothing the front of his coat, "guess you're smarter than you look." I smiled right back. "Guess you're not as scary as you think." He gave one last nod, turned on his heel and walked off into the night. I closed the door behind him, slow and sure, clicked the deadbolt into place. Rosie pressed close to my leg, still watching the door like she expected him to come back. But I knew better. The real fight was over before it started. That's the thing about men like Vincent Beckett. They're used to winning by walking into a room and watching people flinch. But when you don't flinch, when you know your ground is solid, there's not much left for them to stand on. I poured myself another cup of tea, sat back at the table. Outside, the neighborhood was still. Inside, my peace stood right where I'd left it, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. Not with threats, not with fear, not ever. The thing about men like Vincent Beckett, they don't come back when they know the ground they're standing on is soft. And after that night, I didn't hear another word from him. Not a knock, not a call, not a sideways glance. Caroline kept her distance too. Her big white Range Rover parked neat and legal, tucked so far into her own driveway it barely breathed. But it wasn't about them anymore. It was about me, about learning, really learning, that sometimes the best way to hold your ground isn't by shouting or swinging. It's by standing still, solid, certain, by knowing your worth, and refusing to shrink just to keep others comfortable. For a long time, I thought being quiet meant staying out of trouble, that keeping my head down was the safe way, the smart way. And sure, there's truth in that. There's wisdom in knowing which battles to walk away from, but there's also wisdom in knowing when to stay, when to plant your feet, when to say, this is my line. You don't cross it. I'm not a fighter, never have been. Not in the way folks think. I've never thrown a punch in my life, never raised my voice loud enough to shake a room. But that doesn't mean I don't know how to fight. It just means I learned to fight different, with patience, with proof, with plans. The thing is, people like Vincent and Caroline, they count on folks like me staying silent. They count on the world looking away when power leans on the small and the soft-spoken. But silence, when it's chosen, when it's deliberate, that's not weakness. That's power in its purest form, because it means you're not afraid to wait, not afraid to let the truth do the work for you. I didn't tell my neighbors about the visit that night, didn't share the threat or the way my hands trembled just a little after I locked the door. Didn't need to. What mattered was that my garden still stood. My peace stayed right where I'd planted it. The lavender grew back, stronger than before. Funny how that happens. A few weeks later, I was out by the marigolds when Mrs. Grant passed by with her little dog. She stopped, smiled, nodded at the blooms. "They're looking good," she said. I smiled back. "Thanks." She lingered a moment, then added soft, "I'm glad you stood up for yourself, Jamal." I nodded, but I didn't say much, because it wasn't just about me. It was about every person who's ever had to swallow the lump in their throat and bite back the words they wanted to say. About every neighbor who's ever been made to feel small on their own street. About every time someone's had to choose quiet just to stay safe, but dreamed of what it might feel like to choose quiet because they were strong. I'm not a hero, wouldn't even know how to act like one. I'm just a man with a patch of dirt, a good dog, and a little know-how about how systems work. But if there's one thing this taught me, and maybe if you've stayed with me this long, it might mean something to you too. It's this. Peace is worth protecting. Respect is worth asking for. And dignity? Dignity is not something you have to fight for with your fists. Sometimes all it takes is standing your ground, saying no with your whole self, and meaning it. So if you're out there, if someone's parked their assumptions across your life, blocking your way, making you feel like you don't belong, hear me when I say you do. You always have. And whether your stand is loud or whether it's quiet like mine, I hope you take it. Because we all deserve that little piece of earth where we can breathe easy, where we can stand tall, where we can plant something good and know it'll have the space to grow. I sit on my porch most evenings now, Rosie at my feet, tea in my hand, lavender swaying soft in the breeze. The world's still loud, still messy, but right here, it's quiet. And that quiet, that's mine. I earned it. This isn't just one man's story. It's not simply about a driveway, a garden, or a well-timed email. It's about the quiet battles many of us face. Those small, everyday moments when someone tries to take up space that isn't theirs, hoping we'll stay silent. It's about standing up, not with anger, but with steady resolve. The kind of stand that often belongs to the overlooked, like the black man at the center of this story, who chose respect over rage and wisdom over war. That's why these emotional stories carry weight, because they show us that strength doesn't always have to shout. Sometimes justice moves in waves, calm, deliberate, unstoppable. Here at Narrated Stories, we believe in sharing these moments, not just to entertain, but to remind each other that small acts of courage can ripple outward. They can make change, one person, one neighborhood at a time. This is the heart of Unraveled Fates, telling the stories that often go untold, lifting up the quiet victories that deserve to be seen. If this story touched you, made you think, or reminded you of someone you know, share it. Someone out there may need this reminder today. That dignity is worth protecting. That peace is worth holding on to. That your voice, however quiet, still matters. Thank you for listening. And thank you for standing on the side of justice.